Hi, I'm Alex Worsnip, and I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Today, I'd like to share some ideas with you about what I'm going to call suspiciously convenient beliefs, drawing on my recent article, Suspiciously Convenient Beliefs, and the Pathologies of Epistemological Ideal Theory. Let's start with a couple of semi-fictional examples. First, consider Connor. Connor is a billionaire who would stand to greatly financially benefit from the elimination of income taxes. Connor is interested in economic policy and its moral foundations. In thinking about these topics, he has become convinced of the view that government taxation of income is theft and is thus unjust. Next, consider Emily. Emily is a Supreme Court justice who holds strong moral and political views. However, Emily also holds the view that when judges engage in statutory interpretation, they should set aside their personal moral and political views and simply adhere to the plain original meaning of the statutes. Yet when Emily arrives at her interpretations of the plain original meaning of the statutes, they consistently and reliably support rulings that happen to align with her own personal moral and political views. Connor and Emily hold beliefs that seem suspiciously convenient, in the sense that these beliefs seem to align a little too neatly with their interests and desires. As a billionaire, it's convenient for Connor if income tax is unjust, and it's psychologically comfortable for him to believe this. It makes him think that justice is on his side. Similarly, it's convenient for Emily if the meanings of the statutes just so happen to support rulings in line with her own personal moral and political positions. Now, sometimes we encounter the idea that showing that a belief is convenient for the believer is no way to show that it is irrational. It's sometimes even said to be fallacious to criticize someone's beliefs by questioning their motivations, rather than trying to rebut their arguments. In the rest of this video, I'm going to try to convince you that this isn't right. Instead, the fact that a belief is suspiciously convenient is evidence that it is irrational, and this should make the believer less confident in it. Here's an argument for this conclusion. It uses three premises. The first premise is this: the fact that your belief is suspiciously convenient is evidence that it was produced by motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning is a process, documented extensively by psychologists, where a desire to believe something motivates you to subconsciously engage in a biased process of reasoning designed to produce that belief. Suppose, for example, that a parent, perhaps subconsciously, wants to believe that her kid is really smart. This might motivate her to pay more attention to evidence that her kid is really smart, and less attention to evidence that he's not. Or it might motivate her to give a lot of weight to evidence that her kid is really smart, and find ways to dismiss evidence that he's not. Or it might motivate her to interpret ambiguous evidence as favoring the conclusion that he's really smart, rather than the conclusion that he's not. Importantly, when motivated reasoning occurs, the desire to believe something doesn't just produce that belief directly. Rather, it produces it via a process of reasoning, of responding to arguments and evidence that is subconsciously biased. But since this bias isn't detectable by the person engaged in motivated reasoning, they feel like their belief is rational and is supported by the arguments and evidence. We all engage in a lot of motivated reasoning. Knowing that, why is the fact that your belief is convenient, in particular, evidence that it was produced by motivated reasoning? Roughly, it's because it would be awfully lucky if unbiased reasoning just so happened to produce exactly the beliefs that are convenient for us. It would be awfully lucky if unbiased reasoning just so happened to lead Connor to exactly the beliefs about justice that favor his personal financial interests. Or if unbiased reasoning just so happened to lead Emily to interpretations of the statutes that align with her personal moral and political views. And it'd be even luckier if this kept on happening again and again, time after time. By contrast, the convenient beliefs that Connor and Emily hold are exactly the beliefs that we would expect them to arrive at if they were engaged in motivated reasoning, if their interests and desires were playing a role in producing their beliefs. That's why the convenience of their beliefs is evidence that they were produced by motivated reasoning. Let's now turn to our second premise. Evidence that your belief was produced by motivated reasoning is evidence that it is irrational. Why is this? Because, as we've already seen, motivated reasoning typically involves interpreting your evidence in a biased way, so that you end up thinking the evidence supports your desired belief more strongly than it really does. And this is liable to lead you to hold a belief even when it isn't really supported by your evidence. And that's irrational. So for example, if the parent interprets her evidence in a way that's biased towards the conclusion that her kid is really smart, she's liable to overestimate the evidence in favour of this conclusion, and so to believe it even if the evidence in its favour isn't really that strong. That's irrational. The same goes for Connor and Emily. Finally, let's consider our third premise. When you get evidence that your belief is irrational, you should reduce confidence in your belief. This premise is the subject of quite a bit of controversy. Some people think instead that whether you should reduce your confidence in your belief depends only on whether your belief is irrational, and not on whether you have evidence that it's irrational. I can't resolve this decisively in the time I have left here. But in my article, I argue that the idea that you should reduce confidence in your belief only if it actually is irrational is only good advice for godlike people who can always perfectly tell whether their beliefs are rational or not. But we are not godlike, and we often can't tell whether our beliefs are rational. This is especially true when motivated reasoning has been at work, since, as we've seen, engaging in motivated reasoning leaves us feeling like our beliefs are rational, even when they're not. So I think imperfect humans like us should take account of evidence that our beliefs are irrational by decreasing our confidence in those beliefs. Having defended my three premises, I can now put them together to deliver the conclusion I promised. 1. The fact that your belief is suspiciously convenient is evidence that it was produced by motivated reasoning. 2. Evidence that your belief was produced by motivated reasoning is evidence that it is irrational. 3. When you get evidence that your belief is irrational, you should reduce confidence in your belief. So, conclusion, the fact that your belief is suspiciously convenient should lead you to reduce confidence in it. In closing, I want to encourage you to ask yourself, are some of your beliefs suspiciously convenient? If they are, I've argued, you should think that they might well be the product of motivated reasoning, and that they might well be irrational. And this, I've argued, should make you at least somewhat less confident in these beliefs than you were before you began.